Hey everybody, Edo here, and I am excited because I have JT on the line. Say hello, JT.
Hi, everybody.
And JT is the founder of the Game Crafter, which is an
Indeed.
incredible and useful site. To just kick things off, like, how did you start? How did you come up with the idea? Where did it come from? I really know nothing of the history and backstory of the company, so I'm very curious.
Sure. Yeah. So my business partners and I were doing software for the U.S. government. Actually,
Okay.
this we were in business together, and but as a hobby, I've been designing games since I was in high school, and I was looking around for a company like the Game Crafter, and there wasn't one. There were carcasses of companies that tried to do what we were doing, but they had all come and gone by the time I was looking for them. And so I said to my partners, hey, why don't we start a little like side business? This isn't going to make us any money, but it'll just be a little hobby that we can do on the side because we're software people. We can build a website and,
Sure.
and do all of that. And they thought I was crazy, but they went along with it for some reason. And so that's how we got started. It was just I wanted a service like the Game Crafter, and it didn't exist. So I thought I'd create it.
Well, and so there's a couple parts here. I mean, for one, you guys are known for a really robust site with a great user experience, right? Like you've really done when you
Yeah,
talk about that background in software engineering, how to make a site that's very adaptive and responsive to the user. It's really fantastic. But there's also
that's the
the
goal.
manufacturing part of it. So presumably you knew how to make a website, but I imagine you might not have known how to do all the printing work. Like, how did you figure out the whole making the stuff part of it?
We really didn't know anything about that when getting into it. I mean, obviously, I've had my home printer where I've been
Yeah,
handcrafting cards
sure.
on an inkjet and then cutting stuff, but not at an industrial level. So to start with, we actually got into we partnered with a local printing company here in Madison, and we were going to have them do all the production work. Our goal was to be more like Lulu, where we have the website lulu.com
Yeah,
for
yeah.
those who don't know. So we were going to have the website and then offload all of the actual work to someone else that knew what they were doing.
Sure, sure.
Uh, but within about a month, it was very clear that he was not going to be able to keep up. And when I say he, it was a whole company, but the
Sure.
guy that we were working with that owned it weren't going to be able to keep up with what we were doing. And so we started researching everything we could, and within 3 months, we started our own production facility. So we went and, leased a printer and bought some die cutting equipment and hired some staff and all that. So by month three, we were in the production business.
Yeah, well, and help me get this on a timeline because I'm very curious. So, when was month one? When did you start?
It was July 2009 is when we officially launched the site. I mean, we had been working on the software part of it for 6 months
Right.
before that, but July 2009 is when we actually launched the site and people started buying stuff.
So you're coming on a decade. I mean,
Yeah, we're
you're like
8.5
old
years.
board game business folk now. And so, okay, and so initially, because I mean, I've only been watching you guys since maybe 14 when I started caring about that sort of stuff. But
Uh-huh.
um, how was back then? What really was your offering? Just
Basically nothing. I mean, we did cards, poker-sized cards,
right,
and we had a couple of mats, just sheets of paper or cardstock, basically in a couple of different sizes, and then a handful of parts and dice. That
right.
was it. It was very small, and what we produced was very rudimentary compared to what we do now.
Sure.
It was not. Our goal these days, of course, is to make it look like you can't tell the difference between what we produce and what you might get off the shelf of a board game shop. But back then, it was just like Wild West. Do whatever we have to do, make it
Right,
work.
right, right. And and so I'm curious. I'm going to ask you some business things, and if any of them are information you don't want to share, that's totally cool. But
Sure.
so and again, I don't know when the split was. You've sort of done two things. When I look at people who use your site, there's the manufacturing games, also with the purpose of essentially selling on your site, and these
Hmm.
games are sort of like other like drive-through cards, or other where they're making a game that isn't going to be published, isn't going to store shelves, and they're going to sell it. And then there's the other part, and sometimes it's the same person too. But then there's the other part, which is really this is a professional company, or this is something that fully intends to either through Kickstarter or otherwise to make the game, they just want to use your services as a robust prototyping
Yes.
component service. Do you have a sense of like how much of your business is each and how that's changed over the years?
Yeah, so prototyping is about 25% of our business. It started off being about 100% of our business.
Sure.
But these days it's about 25% is people just making copies for themselves, for their own prototypes, that sort of stuff. Another 25% or so is people who are not designers coming to the site, buying other people's games. And then there's roughly 50%. Just shy of 50% actually, that is kind of bulk orders, and that would be 10 or more copies in a single order. And it might be because we're fulfilling a Kickstarter. It might be because somebody's buying copies to sell at conventions. A lot of times we do a lot of corporate work, so there's like Cisco or Adobe. Big companies like this are making games that they use for internal education purposes, and so we'll manufacture games for large corporations in that regard, so there's a lot of bulk orders from lots of different sources, but bulk is kind of most of the business. And then we also have a small but thriving, it's about 5% of our overall, which is just parts sales. People that are looking to kit up a game,
Sure.
Maybe they got a version of Agricola that had cubes and they want all the little meeples, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
And so, cool. I actually had thought that the prototyping side was a little bit larger, though. Sometimes, when you're making a bunch of reviewer copies, you do go into the bulk side of things. But I hadn't been aware.
Yeah, and we can't tell the difference between that. If you're, So,
but I hadn't been aware that you guys were doing as much of the corporate. Do you actually? Well, okay. Another question for how big is the Game Crafter business in terms of people? I mean, how much staff do you have?
Across everybody, so all the different departments, there's 29 or 30 people. Something like that.
This is a real I mean, that's a lot of people. Yeah. I mean, that's a real size.
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
No, it's good.
So we have different departments. There's mechanics that are repairing equipment. There are actual crafters that are making stuff. There's marketing people. There's customer service people. So there's lots of different areas. So they're not all making games.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, there's.
But you might have somebody, a sales manager in charge of corporate business, right? Or somebody who's responsible for all that, right? So that's sort of how you're growing your portfolio. So and then. I mean, so 2009, that's not really Kickstarter land yet, right? That's still just independent, small people who are making
that was the
games.
Same year Kickstarter started, I think.
Perhaps,
but we weren't doing Kickstarter back then, no.
Yeah. And
for the first 3 years, we just basically did what I said, some cards and some parts. That was basically it.
And so how would you say that Kickstarter, as a platform has impacted your business? I mean, presumably quite well, but I mean, can you see key trends that you've noticed on your business side alongside the progress of Kickstarter?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways that it's impacted us. Obviously, we do the bulk fulfillment for some Kickstarters, and like you said, also prototypes. People need to make a video of what their game looks like and send it out to reviewers before the Kickstarter actually launches. So they need copies. So that part of it. But actually, there's a lot of indie publishers who will do their Kickstarter. They'll get those copies out, from a long run manufacturer. They'll get those out to their backers, but then people still want more copies, and they're not sure whether they want to do another long run. So instead, what they'll do is they'll convert it into a Game Crafter version, and so then the game will live on the Game Crafter, and they'll keep getting residual sales after the fact.
Interesting. And so then that's probably a little bit of a different. It's a different manufacturing service, but you can do it one at a time, right? Which is an advantage.
Right. Yeah. That way they don't have to risk doing another 2,500 copies or whatever because they're not sure if they can sell those and warehouse them and ship them out, that sort of thing.
Totally. And so, all right. So going back to the story for a second, 2009, your business is starting to grow. It sounds like almost from launch, you got to tell your partners like, "Hey, I was right. Look at all these people." And so, and were there any other major sort of pivot points or inflex points along the way of your business, or was it sort of like pretty much from that get-go, it's just been a steady growth? Are there any other time periods you remember where things slowed down or popped up again? How's your business been between the years?
Yeah, we tried. I think it was 2 years in. We tried to partner with another printing company that didn't go well either. They couldn't keep up any better than the first guy could,
Right.
so we ended up taking it back. So that was the only real slowdown that we had along the road. Is just, we were trying to outsource it. So once we decided to really, we'd done those two partnerships and they didn't work out for us. We basically decided, all right, we're going to go full Monty on this thing. We're not going to do just cards anymore. We're not going to do just parts anymore. We're going to try to make complete custom games, and we're going to do everything in house. And so we call that the second epoch of the Game Crafter.
Sure.
And we had this big blog post that went out, and it kind of went viral, actually, called the Crafters Manifesto. A lot of people still refer to that, but it was like, here's what we're going to do. We laid out the plans to our community, and we went full on into community building. We went full on into production. We started making boxes and foldable boards and all of that stuff. And so basically every time we evolve the Game Crafter to do more stuff, the community grows, proportionally, or actually bigger than the proportion of the new things that we do. So because it's removing limits, it's removing barriers. Somebody will be like, I can't make my game on the Game Crafter because you don't do X. Well, we do X now.
I remember. In more recent terms, when you guys probably, I want to say a year ago, but maybe it was a little more, maybe it was 18 months, introduced die cut custom punch boards.
Laser cut
laser cut,
yeah.
Not that guy. Laser cut ones, but custom shapes is what I meant.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
Because that was a real limitation on from a sort of looking at it as getting it to the sort of retail quality versus, just being in fixed component slugs, right?
Right. Yeah.
It was really cool to see that you guys brought that on, and I've seen tons of work from people using that, right? I mean, it's pretty. I don't know how you look at your different. It seems like something you've added that's done very well, but I don't really. It is
chipboard components like that, like chits and that sort of thing. It's a tenfold increase in the number of people in a single year from the point that we launched that to a year later. 10 times more people were using chipboard components in their games on our site. So that alone is a pretty big increase, right?
It's huge. And so, I mean, I apologize, I didn't pre-read your manifesto for this interview.
Oh, that's fine.
But in terms of where you are today, and when you look at the business, I mean, things I've noticed as of late, right, was the custom laser cuts. You did a lot of custom dice, engraving, etching, or whatever the technology you're using is.
Yeah.
When you look at and you continue to improve this to sort of streamline the site, but when you look at your roadmap and you think of, so we sort of did a short history, but when you look at what your focus is for the next 2-3 years, what are the key areas of growth and investment for you guys?
Well, it's more custom everything, basically. So we're going to be doing custom stickers, custom paper, cardboard, or card stock things. So, like, you want a weird shaped card, we can do that. Weird shaped mat, we can do that. Custom stickers for legacy games and things like that. We've had lots of requests. So we're going to do more on that front. We're also going down the path of maybe doing custom meeples. So if you want, you need a sheriff or whatever, you need a dragon for your game, we might be able to do that for you in the next few months or maybe a year, something like that. That's our goal. And
so currently, most of the stuff you're manufacturing on your own. I mean, you have your additional parts section. Are those parts? Mm-hmm. Those I assume you're just sort of buying in bulk and then distributing. But like, are you? Yes. And so and those you're just sourcing from manufacturers in China or in the United States, or how do you get that part of your business?
Yeah, we have I don't know, 70, 80 different manufacturers that we source parts from all over the world.
Sure.
So whoever's making them, basically,
Right.
because they have the tooling or whatever they have, and we're just like, hey, could we get 1,000? Could we get 50,000? Whatever it is that they, their minimums are to buy, because we don't want to store, 1 million of something.
Yeah. Sure.
But yeah, so we have most of our wood components, for example, are made in Germany. We get a lot of plastic stuff from China. There's actually, we have a U.S. supplier that makes plastic stuff for us as well. So we have suppliers all over the world. We have some people that are doing handmade pieces, like Etsy style stuff that we sell. So there's just crazy amounts of stuff. We also have we work with a bunch of publishers where they'll have overstock items. So like we've just bought 12 pallets of stuff from Mayfair Games, for example, they have all these old dice and components that were from Catan and other games, Euphrates, all kinds of things that they aren't using anymore. They thought they'd have them for spare parts for things, and
Sure.
They don't need them. So we bought them. We're putting them up in our shop. And we did that with lots of things. Jamie Stegmaier, we bought a bunch of stuff for Stonemaier Games, Greater Than Games. There's all kinds of publishers that we work with to kind of buy their overstock parts. And we also buy parts from, Kickstarters too. So like if there's a small publisher that maybe they made trains as part of their game, wooden trains or whatever. So we'll go in on their thing, and it helps make their game cheaper actually, because they're running 1,000 copies or whatever. But when we increase their parts order to 10,000, they get a scale volume that way, and so they can get their game cheaper, and we get new parts.
Sure. Hey man, I have a bunch of really cute alien eeples that were part of my extras. I haven't been able. They're just in a box in the garage. So if you guys want to have,
let's talk after. Let's talk after the show. I'll buy.
Yeah, it happens. It happens, right? There's the excess parts, and then you want to be ready for when people have issues and otherwise. But then at some point you're like, well, the game's not retail anymore. Like there's no more.
Yeah.
Even though we want to get it back. Anyway, so cool. And we mentioned your manufacturing, getting these parts from all over the world, but presumably, you are a U.S. based board game manufacturer, right? Yeah. And among other things, and you do it in different ways. But how do you? And this, again, any of these, I didn't prep you with these questions, right? But like. Okay. I look at the way the trends in business and government policy right now, right? And you see things like even the solar panel thing that just happened, right. 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and it just seems to me that there's such a pressure and desire to push more manufacturing and business to be within the United States. Do you see board game manufacturing growing? As not game making, but really the manufacturing process growing in the States when you look around from your vantage point, or is it really like you guys and nobody else? What are you seeing?
In our business and outside of our business, I think U.S. manufacturing is going to grow again. You see, like Cartamundi just last year bought out all of the production facilities from Hasbro because they're planning to expand into the United States for production. There's already, I forget the name of them. There's a company in Battle Creek, Delano, something like that makes Battle Creek, Michigan, that they make games here in the U.S. I think they make all the stuff for, I don't even remember who it is. I can't remember. Whatever. They make a lot of games anyway. But we're getting requests all the time. Can you go bulk? Can you because right now kind of our best discount for bulk is 100 copies because we're all about short run. Right. But we're constantly getting requests, can you do 500, 1,000, that sort of thing. And so probably within a year, we'll be doing bulk orders on that scale within our facilities because we're getting so many requests. We get requests literally every day for that sort of stuff.
I can imagine. Especially, right? As your quality gets closer, and I see it over time as you guys are getting closer and closer to that line of retail. There's probably some more packaging that happens along the way as you get there. But as you're getting closer to it, the desire to be like, well, why don't I just Why do I have to go through this other thing? Why don't I just have them, instead of printing 20 for me, print me 2,000, right? I can imagine that being, especially people who haven't gotten there yet, right? Sort of like considering a Kickstarter, considering a business, and they're trying to figure out all their numbers. I mean, presumably that would be, I mean, roughly, again, to the extent you're comfortable saying, how many orders would you say, just at the single, I mean, how many orders do you have a day right now, or a week, or whatever metric you use to think about your orders?
Well, so orders is a very vague thing, because an order might contain a couple of parts, or it might contain 1,000 games. So
how many games how many games?
Well, games is easier to say, because it's, then it's a definite thing. So we produced last year, since we're just in January here, we produced just shy or just over 100,000 games last year. So I think it was just over 100,000 games last year. So that's a lot of games for, printing them essentially one at a time. It's not a lot if you're looking at somebody like Panda, or somebody that's, they're printing 5,000 at a time. That 100,000 games
that number sounds huge to me, man. And just from a business growth perspective, do you know that number from the end of 2016?
Yeah, we've for the last 3 years in a row, we've added roughly 10,000. So, last year we were 90 something, or 80. No, we were 88, I think it was, at 2016. I don't know, somewhere in that range. We're adding roughly 10,000 games a year for the last 3 years.
So that's been, 10, 15%, depending on about 10, 15% growth each year. That's pretty
Oh
good.
Yeah, we'd have double-digit growth every year, and then we're adding new things that people are buying. So, like, our parts business was virtually non-existent 3 years ago. Right. With the whole thing we were talking about with upgrades to existing games. And when I say parts, I don't mean parts inside of games. I mean loose parts.
Yeah.
So, like, we've always been selling parts inside of games, but a lot of people weren't buying parts from our site for, outside of games before 3 years ago. And now we're seeing, it's 5% of our business from 0% of our business 3 years ago.
Well, and actually, I remember when we bumped into each other at Gen Con last year, you guys, I don't know if it was the first time you had done it or not, but you had done this sort of like, candy store parts shop thing where you had the column, like literally like a candy store of bulk candy.
Board game candy, we called it.
Yeah, board game candy with the parts, and you could just go in and, I don't know if it was by the pound or by the I don't know how you were selling it, but selling it really as just individual stuff. And at the time, it sounded like that was going well for you. I mean, that was a success.
Oh yeah, it was amazing. We actually sold. So normally Gen Con is a cost center for us. We're just there to promote our service, because we're not selling anything at Gen Con. Last year it paid for more than half of our expenses. We have 6 people there, all the hotel rooms and food and travel and the booth costs and all that stuff. It paid for more than half of our expenses in our first year of doing it. And we're projecting it'll pay for all of our expenses. So it'll actually be, instead of a giant cost center that's like 20 grand that we throw at Gen Con every year, it'll be, we'll actually make a profit off of Gen Con this year, which is crazy for us, because, normally it's a marketing expense, but this is a marketing expense that actually pays us. So that'll be cool.
Hey, then I don't know if it's a marketing expense anymore. But so you talked about moving more into the custom meeple stuff. Then you're thinking about that. What about, the other, I think of other areas of sort of custom work that have been booming in the industry. The other side of it is the custom trays, custom insert, maybe dice tower potentially. But are you looking at that market as well, or not so much, or partnering?
Oh yeah, we're definitely looking at those spaces. We have meeples is a more pressing concern to us because of our existing customer base.
Sure.
However, because that area of like kitting out games is growing so much for us, like I was saying with the parts on that side, we get a lot of those customers asking us, hey, could you make us inserts, or make it like one of the requests we got last week we were at a convention with a bunch of retailers. They were asking for us to make overlays for games where if you bump the table, it kind of ruins stuff because you have cubes laying all over. And
double
if you
thickness things. You mean the
exactly.
Yeah.
So like terraforming Mars. Have you played that?
Yeah.
You got little cubes sitting on top of on these mats, and if somebody bumps the table, all your cubes go all over the place.
Yeah.
So they were like, could you just make a clear plastic insert or a clear plastic overlay that's quarter-inch thick or whatever that you just set on top of that mat, and we could sell those in our shop. People would buy the crap out of that. And so we're like, yeah, we'll do that for you. And so we're probably going to get into a lot more of that, not just with the retailers, but also on our own site as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so hold on a sec. So, you're just growing your Game Crafter empire, expanding.
Mm-hmm.
Your business is doing quite well. Okay, so one of the things that I'd be curious about is, as the industry's been growing, right? We're in Golden Age 2, Golden Age 3, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yep.
But we're seeing that explosion of games, right? Where each year there's more games coming out that can be played. There are more games that are coming out than the previous year. And you guys are sort of part of that because you're facilitating it, which is great. Thank you. You facilitated for me. And for what it's worth, for those watching, if you don't know, all my games since after liftoff, have used the Game Crafter for that prototyping conceptual process.
Thank you for your business.
Yeah, I actually thought I had given you proportionally more business, but now it's like, oh no, that's such a little small drop in the bucket, but that's fine. But anyway, so this explosion of games, and now even selling games in different places and not in retail and via your site and all this, Are you concerned about it? Is it great? Certainly your business is doing well, but when you look at the health of the industry and sort of think about it, what are you excited about and what are your concerns?
Well, I'm not concerned. There are a lot of people that are concerned that there's too many games out there, that sort of thing. There's too many of everything in every field. Like everybody wants to be an actor or a singer or, whatever. It doesn't matter what entertainment field you're in. There's always going to be too many of something, which means that there are winners and losers. Look at the App Store, on Apple or Google, right? There are 100 million apps in either store, but only the top 1,000 or 10,000 or whatever actually make any money, right? So that's true of every industry. So I think those kind of arguments are just fluff noise. Don't worry about that sort of stuff. The industry itself seems to be very healthy. We're on an uptick. I read an article. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I read an article yesterday that somebody forwarded me that said there were 5,000 new games that came out last year. 5,000 added to the thing. Every number I had seen before that was saying something in the 2,000 to 3,000 range. Right. So I don't know if 5,000 is accurate or not, but even if it was 2,000 to 3,000, that's still a ridiculous amount of games, right?
Yeah, it's a ton. It doesn't seem that crazy to me. Like, how many did I play? And I feel like, I played 100 new games and feels like that was 1%. So I don't know. But
I know. I can't even play. People ask me that all the time too. Like, how many games are in your library? Because I buy probably between 5 and 10 games a month off of the Game Crafter. Plus, I also buy long run games that are out in the industry. Plus, just being in the industry, a lot of publishers or whoever will give you copies of games to try out. So I probably get between all those different sources 500-600 games a year. And so I'll play as many of them as I possibly can, but I end up giving away a lot of games. Either I've played them once and then I give them away, and people are like, "Oh, you didn't like this game?" And I'm like, "I just don't have time to play it more than once." Like, here, have it.
Well, yeah, and that's a trend as well. I hear about. And I have perspective on, which is there's this big argument or discussion on how many times you should play a game, and I do the review thing. So a lot of people, there was an article by, I forget his name, but it was like, would you buy your dad buy you a bicycle? I don't remember the article, but it was all about like people criticizing games when they haven't played it 10 times or that kind of thing. And sort of my internal reaction was that, like, in what world do you think people are playing games 10 times anymore? It's turning much more into consumption media than it is sort of the longer form. Now, there's plenty of games that people do.
Yeah. You're going to have your core favorites that you'll play over and over again, but most games are going to get that one play or two plays from a given audience because there's so much that people just want to try stuff, right?
Yeah.
Variety is good.
Yeah,
Nobody eats the same food every day.
Right.
Well, most people.
No, but variety is good, and I think that the themes and mechanics and I mean the it's not like you're getting 5,000 euro games, right up the middle. You've got this
it's
huge
all over the place
range of play, and yeah, no, I think I'm sort of the same way. I have very little space, so I regularly there's a game store nearby, and they're like my second library. Like, they're keeping it. I can't take it back. But like, if you go to their game library, it's like, that's mostly the stuff I give them. And to stay on, not in this area is the area where I'm working through reviews and stuff, but most of the other stuff, to stay on the rest of the shelves, it's gotta, because every time I go to the library, I'm like, which of these games can I get rid of now? And so if it's not still like a game I want to keep, I'm gonna donate it. But so those are things that you're talking about, things that didn't concern you at all. What about, is there anything that concerns you? You're like, no, nothing.
I mean, obviously, there's always concern about, how is the economy going to affect things, and how are these new protectionist regulations, or is that going to cause problems? Because even though we're producing a lot of stuff here, we do still source quite a bit of stuff from China, at least in our parts area, although we're going to start making more of that. So there's always concerns about how the rest of the world is going to affect what we're doing. But as far as the industry, I don't see a lot of things that concern me. If I was a publisher having to buy, I buy all my stuff from China, and then all of a sudden this protectionist regulation comes in, I could see where a publisher would be really concerned.
Yeah, I think it's a significant concern. I mean, being a publisher, if you're running Kickstarters or you're a publisher and you're basing all of it on relatively cheap manufacturing and via China and reasonably low sort of tariffing. I like, the only thing that I say in my mind is like, well, this is not there's like 70 industries above it, or maybe 100 industries above it that are 10 times the size that are going to start dealing with this first, like solar.
Right.
And we'll see, but that's as I mean, not to sort of make this the video where I mention it, but like, to be in an industry where one day the president comes and says, "Oh, there's a 30% change in your model,"
right?
Signed. That's a big deal. Imagine if you're manufacturing, or your component costs just went up 30% overnight. I mean, that's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern to me too. Even though I'm not getting games manufactured there, and I'm only getting a few parts manufactured there, China isn't the only place, right, that I'm getting stuff. I get stuff from Canada. All of our paper, it comes from France. Like, all of the cardstock that we print our cards on, it's casino paper that is only made in France, and so we bring it in container at a time. So,
fortunately, the casino business has some good muscle. So it may be.
It's true.
But true. No, yeah. So I mean, and I think, again, it does speak to the value of the international business. That would be interesting. I've assumed you guys are almost, majority of your business, a grand majority, like near 90% would be U.S. based. I've more and more indie publishers from Europe send me Game Crafter copies. Like, that's how they solve the like shipping reviewer copies. They'll just be like, I get them straight from you guys.
Yep.
And I know it because it comes and it's not sorted and it's just all the stuff in the box. And I'm like,
yep.
But how is the international? Do you see growth in international? Are you shipping more international copies? How has that changed in your business?
Yeah, in the last year, so you're right. Up until last year, it was roughly 10%. Sometimes, some years it'd be 15%, but most years it was about 10% of our business. Last year, we spent most of 2016 negotiating with U.S. Postal Service and UPS, and got really good international rates out of both of them, just due to our volume and all that kind of stuff. But it took us a long time to negotiate with them and then get all of the APIs in place and all that kind of stuff. But we finally got it all in. And so last year we launched much better international pricing for shipping. And so it was, depending on where you're shipping to and the size of the package and all that kind of stuff, it was anywhere from a 5 to 50% savings in shipping. So, I mean, that's a huge amount, right? So the average order was 25% decrease in shipping cost. And as a result of that, we've seen massive growth in international orders. So we're sitting at 25% of our orders are international now, outside the U.S.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's a huge growth.
It is huge, yeah.
Interesting. Well, there are so many interesting elements to your business. I don't know.
Well, and the Game Crafter is only one of them. Yeah. So, I mean, we also do Tabletop Events, which runs a lot of conventions here in the U.S.
Oh, well, tell me about Tabletop Events.
Okay.
You don't have a logo for it on your shirt. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask about it.
So Tabletop Events is software that I wrote because I'm a software guy.
I do know about this. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's software that will help conventions automate running a convention, basically. So it handles all the badge and ticketing stuff for attendees. It handles all the stuff for GMs taking in events that they want to run, and the approval process and scheduling. It handles all the stuff for exhibitor management and game library management, all that stuff. Basically everything you need to run a convention. And we do it. We put it out there, and now we're a year and a half or 2 years in now, and we have 250 conventions running on it. And it basically, is just making their life easier.
Right? Like 250 conventions isn't like 2% of conventions, right? I mean, that
it's
a huge number.
It's 50% of the conventions in the United States run on.
Yeah, that's huge. And so, what's the business model? Is it like an event fee? Is it free? Is it per people who use it?
We charge 2.5% of the credit card sales. So like if somebody buys a $50 badge, then we charge a percentage on top of the badge fee that goes to us. But the conventions basically pay nothing to use it. So the attendees exhibitors, that sort of stuff, are the ones paying us, and it's the 2.5%.
So now I have to think of all these software as a solution or sales. So when are you going after all the backer kits? Like when's that market right for the take?
There's enough of those out there. I don't think we need to do that. It seems like everybody and their brother has one of those at this point. So
even Kirk and his brother or his friend. I don't remember, but well, and so so you saw a need in the component custom manufacturing space. You did that. There was clearly a need at the smaller, not gamma grade convention space, like not the OrcaCons, not the Gen Con size events or smaller.
We're talking to Gen Con about Tabletop Events. Actually,
there you have. Well, fine.
I'm not saying that they're gonna.
Okay, but there was a need. You're now saying we have a better solution, but prior to that, for these other groups, there's a need in that they clearly aren't. There are a couple people who run a convention, or three. They don't have a site. They don't. There was a clear opportunity space, which you're now capitalizing on and then going and taking over everything, which is great. That's what business does. Is there any other sort of blue ocean or opportunity space you're looking at that you're like, there's really a need over there that we should go targeting that you're able to talk about?
I mean, there's 5 or 6 of them that I'm aware of, but I'm not doing anything about yet. I mean, the most recent one that I did something about was we built Component Studio, which is a way to automate all of the art production stuff that you do before you get into the Game Crafter. You have to, you have 100 cards that you want to make. Our system, you design one card, import a spreadsheet, and it designs the other 100 cards for you. So it works kind of like the merge feature in InDesign or Illustrator or whatever, except 10 times more powerful than that. And it integrates. The big thing is that it integrates directly with the Game Crafter. It'll generate print and play files for you. It integrates with Tabletop Simulator. It'll export CMYK files so you can send it to a long run printer. So it's got lots of export options that you wouldn't get if you're just using Illustrator or Photoshop or InDesign or whatever. So.
Awesome. That sounds actually pretty useful. I mean, that's a big level up for designer, artist, publisher going from sort of hand making each card to doing something more systematic for updating and exporting. It's a pretty big deal and a huge time saver. So if you haven't done it yet, you should take a look. Well, we're coming on 40 minutes. I certainly appreciate all the insight. This has been fascinating. I think we hit everything. Was there anything I missed? I mean, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, we're always doing a million things. So what's in my head right at this moment is something that's going on in the background that I can't talk about yet. So
cool. No worries. Well, I'll certainly end then with just a big thank you. I mean, the Game Crafter has been a huge part of my business in terms of building and developing great products. I haven't used the Tabletop Events, but I may have been to a con that used it and I didn't realize it. So thank you there too. And thanks
for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for being on, and thanks for everyone for watching. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Hey everybody, Edo here, and thanks for watching Gaming with Edo. Reviews over here on this playlist, League and Insider videos over here on this one. Subscribe, share, all that good stuff. But most importantly, play some great games. Thanks.